Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
So if you joined us for our very first Deep Dive, you'll remember we looked into Master Lu's work. He's a really renowned leader, sharing Buddhist teachings.
That's right.
Today we're going deeper, specifically into his text, Delusions of Views and Thought. Our mission, really, is to unpack his insights on these delusions and see, how they might connect to our everyday lives, maybe offer a fresh perspective on how we think and perceive things.
It's really relevant stuff.
Absolutely. And just a quick reminder, this is a non-profit deep dive. We're just passionate about sharing these ideas.
Yeah, it's fascinating how Master Lu really isolates these ways we kind of misunderstand reality through our viewpoints, our fixed ideas, but also just the chatter in our minds.
He starts with what he calls delusions of views, right? These misinterpretations that come from, having the wrong perspective.
Exactly. Faulty viewpoints leading us astray.
Okay, so these delusions of views. Master Lu gives us 5 main types. Let me see. There's the view of a self.
Satkasti, yes.
Extreme views, fallacious views, the attachment to wrong views, and the last one is clinging to faulty disciplinary codes or modes of conduct.
Quite a list.
Yeah. Let's maybe start with that first one, the view of a self. Master Lu's explanation is pretty direct.
Yeah.
It's putting I above absolutely everything else.
And you see it everywhere, don't you? In just normal conversation. Think about how often we start sentences with, I think, or I believe. Master Lu even mentioned this about callers on his radio show.
Oh, right.
Yeah, constantly focusing on I, me, my experience. It just shows how deeply rooted that self-focus is.
It's almost like our default setting, isn't it? I want this, I don't like that, this is how I feel.
Yeah.
It's this constant running commentary centered on I.
Totally.
Now, Master Lu draws this really key distinction here between the false self and the true self. He suggests our suffering often comes from latching onto this constructed false self.
And that clinging, it builds walls, right? This ego-driven identity makes us feel separate, maybe defensive. Master Lu's point is that holding on to this illusion of a fixed, independent I keeps us stuck in negative emotions.
It stops us from feeling more connected.
Exactly. Prevents that deeper sense of interconnection.
Which interestingly leads to something else he mentioned. Why it might be hard for animals to be reborn as human.
Oh, yes.
He links it to their intense focus on self-survival, immediate needs. It's like that basic drive really strengthens the delusion of a separate, all-important I.
It's a striking way to show how pervasive this view of self can be across different states of being even. And he ties letting go of this self-focus directly to our emotions.
How so?
Well, things like anger, sadness, unhappiness, hate. He says they thrive when we're desperately holding on to I. Loosen that grip, and those negative feelings lose their power.
So clinging to self is like building your own little hell of negativity.
That's a good way to put it. And letting go opens up the possibility of a more consistently positive state, like he says, a personal heaven. And it's not just mental.
Right, he mentions physical effects too. Being constantly upset impacts our health, even how long we live.
Definitely. And his take on tolerance here is pretty radical. He actually says, and I think this is worth quoting directly, regardless of what others say, they must be correct. They are not at fault. You are the person who's at fault because it's you who is still clinging to the concept of I.
Wow, that really turns things on their head. Instead of blaming others.
It points the finger right back at our own attachment to being right, our own ego, our self. Our defensiveness comes from protecting that I.
That's a huge shift for most of us. Let's take a moment here. When we come back, we'll look at the next delusion, extreme views, and how suspicion can quietly shape our lives. Okay, so moving through the list. The next delusion of view is extreme views. Master Lu describes this as basically being suspicious of people, of situations.
Yeah, that underlying mistrust. Always assuming the worst, maybe?
Like someone who always thinks people have hidden motives, even when there's no reason to.
Exactly that. That kind of pervasive suspicion, it cuts off connection, doesn't it? Creates barriers. That's extreme views.
Okay. And attachment to wrong views. This sounds similar, but seems focused on clinging to what we currently see or have, thinking it's the ultimate truth or correctness.
Yeah, Master Lu stresses that our immediate perceptions, our possessions, They aren't necessarily the full picture or the real deal.
So maybe someone basing their whole identity on their job title or money.
That's a good example. Even if they're unhappy, they cling to those external things as proof of their worth, ignoring maybe deeper feelings. That's attaching to a potentially wrong view of what matters.
Right. And the last one, clinging to faulty disciplinary codes or modes of conduct. His example was insisting someone did something when they clearly didn't.
Yeah, it's about stubbornly sticking to your interpretation or belief, even when evidence contradicts it. Again, being misled by our perceptions and then digging our heels in.
It really shows how tied we get to our own judgments. And that leads into that powerful statement he makes.
The one about reality.
Yeah. But nothing in this world is real. If you believe that your body is real, then when you die, does it still exist? You might say parents are real, but when they pass away, do they still exist?
Mm-hmm. It really forces you to question the permanence we assume everything has.
It definitely does. And that flows nicely into the next big category. Delusions of thought. These are misunderstandings tied specifically to our mental activity, right? That constant stream of thinking.
Precisely. And Master Luke connects these delusions of thought right back to everyday suspicion. He says if you're always doubting people, feeling paranoid, it's a strong sign these underlying delusions, both of view and thought, are running the show. What we see and how we think about what we see are common traps.
It makes you wonder how much of what we experience is just constructed through these flawed filters. Mm-hmm. Now, he also talks about why the human realm, our current existence, is actually a good place for spiritual cultivation.
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive, maybe.
Right, you'd think heaven would be better.
But he argues that too much comfort, too many blessings can make us complacent. We lose the drive. It's often the suffering, the impermanence we face here that actually motivates us to seek deeper meaning, to cultivate ourselves.
So hardship can be a spur to growth. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And following that, he really pushes us to cherish this human life, saying if we don't use it to strive for something meaningful,
we become no different to a dead person.
Yeah, it's a strong wake-up call, isn't it? Make this life count.
And he gives advice on how to manage our minds, too. Don't dwell on the negative, he says. Try to consciously store benevolent thoughts instead, the idea being that what we consistently think shapes our inner world.
And our outer experience, too, presumably. He also mentions needing to keep our cultivation evolving, advancing with the times, like time itself always moving forward.
Yeah, suggesting our inner growth shouldn't be static. It needs to be a continuous process. And he offers this quite profound way to measure our progress.
It is.
The level of unselfishness coming from our heart. He notes that if our practice is mostly about me, about personal gain, its wider impact, the merit and virtue in a Mahayana sense, helping all beings, will be limited.
That focus on others. Mm-hmm. It ties into something seemingly small he mentions, using phrases like, excuse me and I'm sorry.
Right. He sees those as outward signs of our inner cultivation, humility, consideration, our basic character showing through.
But he also points out that even though we learn these phrases as kids,
we often hesitate to use them. Why? Because of that self again, fear of losing face, appearing weak. The ego gets in the way of simple courtesy and connection.
Always back to the ego. Finally, he gets into how merit and virtue actually work to clear away karmic obstacles. He talks about the eighth consciousness. The
storehouse consciousness, yeah. He describes it as this vast repository holding all the karmic seeds from our past thoughts, words, actions, good and bad.
So how does merit help?
Well, when we actively cultivate merit and virtue, doing good things with selfless intention, those positive energies enter this eighth consciousness. Over time, they can purify or transform the negative seeds, lessening their impact on our lives.
It's like cleaning out the storehouse. And he briefly lists the 8 consciousnesses to give context.
Yeah, the 5 senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch. Then the 6th, mental consciousness, our immediate thinking mind. The 7th, manas, tied to ego and clinging. And the 8th, alaya, that deep storehouse. It shows the complexity.
It really does. So, wrapping up this look at Master Lu's delusions of views and thought, the big takeaway seems to be just how crucial it is to recognize these patterns, especially that pervasive idea of self in our daily lives.
Absolutely. Understanding them is the first step to maybe dismantling them, reducing our own suffering, and living a more liberated and compassionate life.
It definitely encourages you to, well, watch your own mind more closely. How often does that I pop up in your thoughts, your speech?
It's a practice in itself, just noticing. And if listeners want to dig deeper into any of this or have questions, please do check the show notes. We'll have more info there.
Yeah, and please email us too. If there are specific topics or texts you'd like us to tackle in future deep dives, we'd love to hear from you.
Definitely. Listener suggestions are always welcome.
So, maybe a final thought to leave everyone with. How might your day-to-day interactions, even the small ones, start to shift if you just consciously observe the role of the self in your thoughts and words, even just occasionally?
Something to ponder.
Indeed. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive.